Oh, okay. Since it's 11 o'clock, I was looking 11:15, but that was the time since it's been recording or something like that. Anyway, happy Saturday, everyone. Unless Mel is into Sunday already, I lose track.
Hey,
Yeah.
it is Sunday, 1 in the morning.
uh, Happy June, everybody. I think we've got that part right. Um, Welcome to our Saturday morning caller training session or preaching session or what have you. And it's been, oh, I can't believe that. Oh, I opened my spreadsheet to look at how many sessions this was, and I forgot already. I think it was this is our 50th one, going a little over a year and breaking for U.S. holidays. And I've been able to talk to many callers slash friends around the world, mostly around the U.S., who were passionate about different things and wanted to share them with us. And we've had some good presentations and discussions, and nobody was available on my list of people to ask for this particular session. So I thought, oh, these people don't want to hear from me again. I've had to fill in too many times, including last weekend. But what am I passionate about? And I don't know if I'm passionate about it, but I like to think about it a lot. And that's one particular form of choreographic management for square dancing. What am I passionate about? Square dancing. Uh, so I thought I'd talk about mental image this time. This is something I haven't done here for a long, long time. No, excuse me, forever on this particular group. I've done it on Mel's. Um, and one of the main reasons is because I have written a book on the subject and I sell that and I run classes on that. And I didn't really want to be advertising my thing, but it's not my thing. There are a lot of people that use mental image. There are a lot of mental image several different approaches to mental image that overlap considerably, but not completely. But let's first of all, just a quick reminder of what is choreographic management. Choreographic management is the art, the skill, the magic, I'm not sure that's the right order, of making the dancers get all kaleidoscope together and then miraculously bringing them back to their original partners and back home and surprising them and frequently surprising yourself as a caller. And there are many different ways to do that. When I was started dancing and even thought about, well, I'd been doing singing calls a little bit already. I decided there was only one way to do that. You had to be born that way. I had no idea that anybody could figure that out eventually. And when I was forced into switching from singing calls to patter calls, I figured the only way was reading. And eventually, if I found a good sequence, maybe memorizing. Much later, and I wish I'd been told this at the beginning when I was starting, but that there are several ways. There's reading, there's memorizing. Some people call it reading off the inside of your eyelids. There's modules, which are zeros, equivalents, transition modules, etc. And there's mental image calling, and then there's sight calling. And I've listed these in the order that, at least that I think of them, as the degree of versatility that you have in what you present. Not necessarily the best order or the worst order, but that's the way it is. Sight calling seems to be the goal of everybody. I'm a sight caller. But I was strictly a mental image caller for a long time because I didn't know about sight, and then once I did, I didn't dare do it because of certain reasons. And when you think about the mental image way, there, as I said, there are several different ways. We might discuss some of the others. And I'm not trying to sell mental image. I'm trying to make people aware that it exists and what its advantages and disadvantages are, and if you're interested, maybe ways to learn how to do it. Um, you're laughing, Yolanda, because you've never seen me at a loss of words. I pause all the time. um, so one of the mental image, yeah, I'm looking at my outline here. That's not a good way to start. All right, one of the um, reasons people use mental image, myself one of them, is we don't have a memory that's really good. We can't memorize lots of modules as a module caller used to do or has to do. Or we can't memorize who started with who the partners are in corners as a site caller has to do, which is a different set every tip, every set. One of the good reasons to learn mental image calling, whether you have another system or not, is that it gives you a better understanding of what's mechanically happening in a square, how that kaleidoscope works. There's some things that govern it, and one of the reasons to learn it, because as a caller you have a big toolbox you should fill with other things, and because it's there, it's one of the things not as prominently taught, used, but I think people should be aware of it, and I think there's more and more awareness of it this past year, maybe due to COVID. I know I've been busier than heck with it. So again, we've talked about that. I feel it falls somewhere in between modular calling and site calling as far as pros and cons. So the pros are you're not dependent on the dancers. If they make a mistake, big deal. You can still resolve the other. If your key square makes a mistake for a site caller, you can still resolve, and the other 13 squares on the floor will get home successfully. Am I being too optimistic by saying 13 squares? And the other thing about not being dependent on dancers, you can actually practice without dancers. You can, you're driving along and you can do mental exercises just to practice and keep your mind in gear. Modules. The advantage over modules is you can get more variety. You're able to do some ad lib calling. You're not restricted to the modules you've called and remembering how they fit together. You can actually do ad lib calling. Not as much as a site caller by any means, but a lot more than you could have otherwise. Let's see. Again, for me, the big thing was not having to memorize over site calling, is I didn't have to memorize corners. For me, the memorizing who started with whom, and it changes every tip, sort of. And yeah, I know there are clues to do it in ways, and that's another subject. And as I say, I do mostly site calling these days, but actually, as most of you know, I do mostly not calling these days since I moved to an island without square dancing 25 years ago. Let's see. One of the pros, one of the advantages over site calling that I like to explain to site callers or would-be site callers, have you ever tried to match two dancers up in your site calling, a partner and a caller and his partner, or a caller and his corner, and they're on opposite sides of the square, and you call pass through trade by, and you go over one side and the person you're trying to match it with scoots across to the other side, or you call couples circulate to bring your guy over there, and the other person scoots over to the other side. Well, with mental image, it's a really easy thing to do to know how to make her stay there. Even if you're a site caller, if you know mental image, that's a handy thing to have. Um, a lot of people these days ad lib their singing calls. Mental image makes it really easy. And it's probably the easiest forms of mental image is when you're doing singing calls. One of the other things some people call a restriction, but I think is an advantage, is mental image is not as versatile as sight calling. And as a result, you tend to stick more to standard formations of choreography. And some people have troubles and they're got a regular club that's not into all this difficult stuff. They just want to dance. And you should be keeping to some sort of standard formations, a little variety in there, but not difficulty. And mental image sort of forces you to do that. I didn't realize this till I switched to sight, and boy, I could call anything, but my dancers couldn't dance as much as they used to. The other thing is with mental image, I was pretty good at looking at the whole floor and keeping them going. And with sight, I started, because my memory is not that bad, I'd only memorized who started with whom in one square. Some callers say they can do 3, 4. I've gotten up to 2 on occasion. But so as a result, I was watching this one square, timing off of it. If they hesitated, I hesitated. And I didn't keep track of the rest of the floor. So I didn't know that they'd been bored or had all broken down. Excuse me. What are the disadvantages of mental image calling? One, it's not as versatile as sight, and there are certain things you want to do with sight that are really cool. 2 is somehow I printed this off too small, my reminder of an outline. If you're a sight caller or a mental image caller or a modular caller already, it's awfully easy to fall back on that without keeping track of the unique things you have to keep track of in mental image. And it's a disadvantage because you sometimes fall out of it. The other thing is I've found over the years that it's much easier for newer callers to learn mental image. Not brand new, but newer callers, because they don't have another system to fall back on. If you're a sight caller and you're trying to do mental image, and all of a sudden you forget to pay attention to something you just did, oh, I can just fall back on sight, and you do that much too easily. One of the disadvantages, and this is a big one, is that learning to do mental image takes a long time. It's not hard, but it takes a long time. Once you know how, it's really easy to use, but it takes a long time. It takes longer than I can teach here in, I've used part of my presentation time already just by talking too much. It takes longer than the 2-hour video that I have on YouTube that you guys are welcome to look at, and I'll mention later. It takes longer than, I was trying to figure out roughly the class sessions I've been doing on Zoom, and we're on a 5th class, I've been able to teach them everything I know in about 23 sessions. And so let's say 24 times typically an hour and a half per session, that ends up being 36 hours to teach. So if you guys want to hang around for the next 36 hours, maybe we can, but no, you need time for it to soak in too and practice in between. Anyway, enough chat. Let's get into doing some actual stuff. Dan, have you set me up for sharing yet?
I believe you are fully capable of sharing, yes. Hey, it worked.
So does everybody see our friend's Taminations, without whom I'd have a lot of troubles doing this? So some people think mental image means I've got to watch an entire square in my head. I've got to be a computer. I've got to know what everything's going on. The people that are, I really apologize for this. The allergies are getting to me. Oh, sorry about that. The site callers know that you don't, because of symmetry, you don't have to memorize all the couples. So these guys I haven't memorized, just the head couple and the side couple. So you have to memorize 4 people. I still can't do that in my mind. That's too much. Some people manage just to remember a partner. Well, there are different ways of memorizing, but tell you what, we're going to go to mental image where we don't have to think about memorizing that person. In fact, we're not even going to memorize this person here. We're going to focus on one active dancer. Now, you can pick any dancer you want. Once you learn the rules of mental image, you can pick any dancer you want. Most callers pick this person here. I've got several women in my classes, and most of them follow the man also, probably because they've been taught by man callers. But all the rules apply to any of these. So let's have the heads square through 4. I guess I'll put it back to normal speed. I do it faster. We know that, I hope we know, that if we're in this formation, if the square is an 8-chain through formation and everybody has partners and corners and is facing corners, we can do an Allemande left. Not after a square through because of hand availability, but right now we're isolating strictly on getting the guy, everybody to the right spot. And I like to think of it following the active guy. I just have to bring him to this spot. Let me switch screens for a second. Ta-da! All I have to do, can you see my spot right now? Did I switch screens appropriately? I need a nod, a yes.
Yes, we're seeing your 3W Allemande spot.png right now.
So to some extent, I know that to call a successful Allemande left, I have to bring us back to an 8-chain through formation and bring the active dancer to this spot. Now the question is, will everybody else be on their correct spot or not? That's what we're going to show you, that where the magic comes in. I'm going back to this. I guess I do have to mention that a mental image caller, just like a site caller, has to keep track of the formation of the square. Am I in waves? Am I in lines? Am I in a double pass-through formation? All these other things. And hopefully a module caller will have to know that too, so he knows what module he can call next after the one he's done. Know where the ending position. You also have to know the arrangement, whether the couples are same sex, half sashayed, normal couples, etc. But you have to know that for site or mental image, or for modules or anything. What was I going to say? Come on, Beck, use your mind. my mental image of reality has disappeared right now. So the site caller has to know where everybody is but watching, and doesn't need to know it till resolving. The mental image caller only has to know the location in this whatever formation arrangement is where this one person is, and has to know where that spot is that he has to move him to. Now, there was something I was going to throw in, and maybe I will later when I remember it for a third time. Let's just show you, I'm going to square my set here, and I'm going to show you, by not watching who these other people are, how they will take care of themselves. And I could do that by doing a sequence and having everybody show up at their corner, and you'd say, oh, but you memorized that corner. So instead, I'm going to do a sequence that I haven't memorized. You guys are going to help me. Somebody give me a call I can do from home for the heads. Somebody else give me another one.
Heads past the ocean.
Heads past the ocean. Now, I will say that I can't follow everything, but I can follow a lot. So if you tell me, so just help me through this to prove that it's not a memorized sequence, but don't try to trick me, because if you do, I'll say tilt and somebody else give me another call. But so far we're cool. Somebody give me a call.
Explode and square through 3.
You want to go to the plus list? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That won't work because I have to tell Damnation centers and then spell it right. All right. Somebody else give me a call.
Center's cloverleaf.
Thank you, Mel. Keith, give me a call. I'm set up now, so I can't see all your faces, so I don't know who's.
John, by making a note.
Sorry about that.
Say that again?
Double pass through. I was watching the end of the tennis match, multitasking. The public gal won. So now she's going to see if she can win the doubles tomorrow.
Steve Avery, give me a call. I'm picking on somebody that doesn't know mental image, so
First couple go left, next couple go right.
I'm going to say tilt for that because I don't feel like pushing my mind that far.
No problem. From there, zoom.
Okay, give me another one. Steve, another one.
Cloverleaf.
All right, let me try to remember what that does because I don't use that one too often. We're there, that goes to there. Okay. We're in a double pass through formation. We have the active man in the middle, and yeah. Tell you what, why don't I resolve from here?
Pass through.
I'm going to call it Dixie Grand. And Alan Ann left and promenade home.
Where you are.
Yeah, I guess I can't. I screwed up. I know what the problem is. It was, it was my using the cloverleaf.
You changed your spot.
At this point, let's just keep an east-west route that we're doing, and I'm going to do something like, whoops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this. And I'm just going to do leaders trade. So,
I'm sorry, I moved the spot.
No, that's all right. We're
Well, not only move the spot, but change the orientation of the square. That's the hard part to track.
And here I went off list all the way on the plus just so that wouldn't happen.
Mike,
you keep telling yourself that, Chris.
Michael, give me a call. Any call I can do from here. Michael can't find the mute switch.
Step to a wave, boys run.
Okay, somebody said step to a wave, boys run. Oh, I don't know. Let me do it. Let me resolve from here. Let me try again. Ferris wheel. Centers. Oh, let's get there quickly. Pass through. And now we should be doing better than we did before. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I got it again. I have not been. I can do this when I'm calling. This is really embarrassing. But
Yes.
yeah. All right. Veer left.
The boys run was an X, non, so you know.
Yeah, I know. Bend the line. Past the ocean.
Well
Somebody
done.
puts
That's a well done at work. You said you were going to challenge your students and those that, to make sure they were paying attention. They knew it worked right. Your test has worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Somebody put some music on so he can call.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks, Chris.
Let's try it from here. Alapan left and promenade home. Okay. Well, every time I do that when I'm doing a full presentation of this, it works except for once. And this makes two. The one time was when I was doing one of the two presentations I did of the Caller Lab accredited caller coach group, and it didn't work there. When I'm calling, I can keep moving along fine. When I'm trying to think different things at once when I'm talking, I have troubles. But anyway, moving on. Let's see, what did I want to do? I wanted to share a screen here. See if I can find the screen I wanted to share. I guess I want to cancel out of that. Open up. Well, close this. Hide that. Not that one. Yeah, we can leave that up. Where we'll put that. How about there? This. There. And one more thing. And I'm going to share my entire screen. And I think the thing that I want to show is hiding behind. Can you guys see the window I'm moving now, which is all you people on Zoom?
No.
No.
That window is the picture. The window of us is invisible to us.
Oh, okay.
So we see, well, except for the occasional black flicker, we see
Okay.
your X's for CTS.RTF on the side and your 3W element partially
Okay.
obscured by that and your terminations.
All right. So here's the deal. We're gonna move these people back and forth along this grid with this chicken plucker route here. And eventually we're going to bring the active guy back to this spot. And we're going to do that using any call we want. Spread this out a little. Any call we want except any of these. There's a long list of calls we can use except any of these. And I guess I'll start it off with the heads square through 4. Somebody give me a call. Any call. Quick.
Slide through.
Slide through. Okay. Somebody else give me a call. Dancers are waiting. I'll do past the ocean. I'll do an all 8 circulate.
Nice.
Swing through.
Swing through's on this list. I'm not letting you use it
Oh,
yet.
sorry. My apologies.
Gee, I don't know what we can do from here
Well,
without.
do that explode and square through 3 again, or whatever. Explode and square through 2, maybe. Won't hurt you.
You get away with a chain down the line?
Actually, you can't do it from a right-hand wave here. But we just did an explode and square through 2. That was a good idea. And chain down the line, if you'll notice, where did it go? Oh, I guess I was making things easier. You can do a chain down the line. Let's do a trade by.
Nice.
Trade by. Right and left through. Veer left. I'm getting him into two-face lines because that's what we wanted for a chain down the line. As long as it's a two-face line, I can do a chain down the line. Somebody that hasn't taken the course, resolve the square. So the basic thing is we've done some dancing. We haven't done too much. We've restricted it so we can't use these calls. And now we want to dance to an 8-chain through setup with a guy on this spot over here. How do we do that? Anybody?
Slide through.
Slide through. So we danced a bunch. We've avoided these calls. We've moved the guy to here, the spot, everybody in 8-chain through setup. So hopefully, where we go? He's facing his corner. He has his partner. We have couples 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the basis of what we do with mental image. Let's go a step further. Let's go home. Let's hide these people. And I'm going to call one of these calls here. Let's start with ladies chain, rather head ladies chain. Now, hopefully you'll understand that if I were to call the same sequence we had just done, except have that head ladies chain there, that he's starting with a different person, he's going to end up with a different person. But if I call another ladies chain, then he'd end up with the correct person. So it turns out that you call any one of these calls that I told you couldn't, and repeat that call, it'll cancel the effect of the first one. Furthermore, it turns out that if you call any one of these calls and you want to cancel the effect, you can call any other one of these calls. So let's call, let me just give an example here. Heads past the ocean. We seem to do that a lot. Extend. I'm going to call 2 calls on here. One recycle and one sweep a quarter. It's up here somewhere. And they will cancel the effects of each other. I'm going to pass the ocean here and call 2 more calls from there. Typical combinations, swing through and boys run. That got our partners exchanged, just brought them back. I'm going to call, now I'm going to bring the guy to his spot and see what happens. Let's do the plain old vanilla way. Ferris wheel. Center is square through 3. So I've used some of these calls, but I've used them in pairs to cancel the effect of them. Still brought this guy back to his spot. And sure enough, he's facing corner and all the couples are in sequence. That's the basics of it. That's what it's all about. Now, let's see, what was I going to say? Some of the other methods that people use, and some of those people are in this group, have a slightly different list here. Certain calls, touch a quarter and walk and dodge are the ones that I'm thinking of. They use a different list. It also works if you stick to your own list, but this is the way I learned it. This is the way I taught myself it. So I use this, but you can work with any one of those. Let me go to one other thing here. This guy here, you can see this LMR in the middle. We've talked about if you're using any of these calls, and I refer to them as X calls for exchanging partners, and all the others I call O calls for having zero O effect, but you don't have to use those terms. I said as long as you call, whenever you've called an X call, you cancel it, you can do an Alaman left. Now here's the big deal. We called some X's. I'm working with just the heads in the middle of the square, or the heads working on the left side of the square with these people, or the heads with the right side of the square working with these people. As long as the X I've called is in the same location when I cancel an X, as long as it's in the same location, I did, a swing through Boys Run, canceled over here. As long as I cancel it in the same location I did it, my spot is always here. When you get into more advanced stuff, if you cancel it in a different location, the spot moves. That's something you have to keep track of, but it doesn't move very often. And as far as learning which calls are X's and which ones aren't, that comes. There's some rules that help you understand that, and that's one of the things you have to learn. But it doesn't change with every tip, and it doesn't change with every dance. An X is an X is an X. Run, whether it be boys run, girls run, centers run, ends run, cross run, it's always an X. Trade, whether it's centers trade, ends trade, etc., it's always an X. Except for couples trade, because that's a combination of centers and ends. Flutter wheel, whether it's flutter wheel or reverse flutter wheel, whether it's lead right or lead left. And I just didn't want to complicate this with lots of words. It's pretty easy. It's a lot of work, but you can learn what the calls are, what the X's are that you have to worry about. Take the call flutter wheel. When you're learning that call, I've got to know it starts with normal couples. With facing couples. I've got to know that it exchanges the position of the left-hand dancer. I've got to know it ends in facing couples. And so this means I have to add one additional thing. It's an X type. It's on the X list. It's a little work, but it'll come. Let's see. When I teach this, and I assume when Daryl teaches it and such too, we put on, and I'm going to go to this. We put on lots and lots of restrictions as to what you can do. And then one by one, we remove these restrictions. Like the restriction I put on you, you have to stay in left to right route for the time being. Like the restriction I put in then was we couldn't call any of the X-type calls. But then we could add them as long as we did it in pairs. When you learn this, there's thousands of restrictions. We pull them off one at a time and expand your use of this more and more. We never pull off as many as a site caller has, but we sure do have a lot more versatility than we had at the beginning and that a module caller has. And that's the basics of it. Yeah, I'm not even going to show spot moving, um, unless people want to see it. But in summary, it takes a long time to learn it. But once you, I guess what I want to say is it's not new to me. It's not original with me. I learned it from Jay King. I evolved a little from there. Um, Daryl Clendenin learned it, I believe, from Jay King. Jay learned some of the stuff from other people. Um, Eric Tangman is with us. I think he learned it from Jay stuff. I was looking to see. Now there's another guy here that Jay evolved it at the same time that another group in New England did. They called it the slot system. Um, and we've got an active caller in Vermont that has been using that for a long time, since way back when. It's just not that commonly used because people think they have shortcuts. But to me, it's just amazing that there are some rules that govern this stuff, this kaleidoscope we like to use. And I think it's fascinating and worth using, worth knowing about. I've been telling people, I started with mental image because I didn't know there was anything else. I went on to site, forced myself into losing control of the mental image, and for years told people I very much understand mental image, but I'm a site caller. But then I started realizing, I still use mental image a lot. Maybe the first sequence of every tip, because I haven't taken time to memorize who started with whom. Ad-libbing singing calls, I use mental image all the time for that. I go to a guest club where I can't memorize people, especially if it's a festival or an event where everybody's in club costume, and I can't find a way to distinguish people until I notice minute differences. So I still use it a lot. As I've said before, there's a lot to learn. It takes a long time, but once you've got it, if you learn it step by step, you can, and once you've got it, it makes it really easy to use. How do you learn it? Well, once you've learned the basics of it, the easiest way to get it as part of your repertoire is when you're teaching a class. And each time you teach a new call to that class, you add that call to your repertoire of using in the mental image. And for the first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 10 lessons, most callers don't teach anything on the X list other than Ladies Chain. So it's a pretty easy way to start integrating that into your stuff. You can learn it if you wanted to learn it. You can find somebody that uses it and teaches it, like Daryl, like Don Beck, what have you. I've written a book on it, but I'm not trying to sell the book. In fact, it's out of print right now, although if there are enough requests, I will get another batch printed. I run some Zoom lessons on it, but I'm not pushing those either. But we've had 5 groups go through or in process of going through where the sessions go anywhere from 18 to 32 sessions, depending on how quickly people want to learn and such, or how much practice I remember to give them. If you want a slightly further in-depth talk than what I'm just giving you as an introduction here, I've got a 2-hour video on YouTube that we should probably put the link in the notes for, or in the chat, so that people can go to that if they want. But with that, I've gone 50% over the time I wanted to chat myself. So I guess I want to open it to questions, open it to discussion. I do, as I say, I'm looking at faces here that I know use a parallel system. I'm looking at faces that have been through my course on giving it. I'm looking at people that I don't know if they've used it or not, and so maybe this is new to them. One of the people I'm looking at, Chris, if you don't mind me saying, stop me if you do, but has had a medical problem recently. He's losing his sight. he is having a lot of difficulty seeing. And
I
Chris,
can't see, I can't sight call really anymore because I can't tell if there's a square in front of me, even right in front of me. I can't tell. I can tell there's people there, but I can't see them very clearly, and I don't know how many there are. So when they square up, they have to tell me, okay, we're squared up. So that's about as. So I can see that there's motion going on, but I can no longer see anything really beyond that. So
but
uh,
Chris learned a mental image way back when, and as well as other stuff, and he's very proficient at it, and now he has to rely on it. Um, so let's hope that you guys don't add it to your toolbox just because you're planning on going blind. But it was a lifesaver, I think, for you, Chris. I've seen videos of you calling that you can't even tell that you're having troubles visual.
I
You look
think
like,
there's only one video of me
and I
that's
know you're
anywhere.
upset that it's there, but
It sucks. That's like so.
if I hadn't known Chris, I would have known that you were not 2020 seeing. You were 2020 mental image. Of course, then I know you too, so that's anyway. Anyway, time for me to shut up and you guys to talk. Ask questions, observations, either people that have been through or are going through the course, or people that this is brand new to and want to know more about, or want to question why I screwed up at the beginning when I tried to demo it. Very, very embarrassing. Raise your hands, just speak up. Come on, do something.
While people are thinking of a question, I'll just recount my my history with mental image. I started dancing and also learning to call right around the time when Don was finishing up his book, and so the first thing I started doing when I was learning was writing, and then very quickly, within really just maybe probably about a month or two of that, I got wind of Don's book and looked over actually a draft of it. Now, then the way I actually learned it was there was another guy who was reviewing the book, I think,
Yeah.
and he had looked at it and come up with a slightly different take on it. It's the same system, but it's sort of just a little different way of looking at a few of the things. And so, and he was at the club I was at every week, and he was one of my dance teachers even. And so he taught me that, and we sat around after every Tuesday dance, and we'd be up in the cafeteria playing with little sugar packet checkers and things on the table there, working out the mental image stuff. So and then I used it for a long time, and whenever I was calling, like plus or below, and then if I did a lot of challenge calling, and that was really all written. And then after about a couple of years of that, I woke up one day and decided I could sight call. So and then pretty much after that, I just sight called. But I've always used it all this whole time, since 1983, I guess, for what Don said, the same things. I use it on most of my singing calls. Sometimes I'll get a really cool singing call figure that I'll read or something. But usually I just mental image the singing calls. And also, when you go to a club that you've never been to, and you're just trying to get the hang of the first tip there, it's good for that. I've even gone so far as I'll start calling and then realize that, well, this doesn't happen much anymore, thankfully, but there have been occasions where I've started calling a tip, and then I suddenly realize a few calls into it, maybe 5 calls into it, that I totally forgot to look to see who was dancing with who. I just put the needle on and went for it. And then about 5 calls in, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to look. And then I would just replay in my head really quickly the 5 or 6 calls I did on mental image. and while they're in the middle of a right and left through or something, because you can do it that quickly, when you're comfortable with it, and then just pick up from there doing mental image. So it's handy for lots of things. Sometimes I call a lot for groups where they switch, not only do they switch partners every time, but they switch around genders, and all that stuff. So it's also good for getting used to them. And so I still, and of course now I basically use it all the time. So anyway, that's but I've been doing it forever. So anyway, it's great. I love it.
Thanks, Chris. I also want to mention that once you peel these rules off one at a time, you can easily learn to dance directly to a right and left grand instead of to an Alaman left. If you want to do a right-hand lady progression on your singing calls, no problem. There are rules, that can follow once you know the mental image, and it's not a problem.
And you can do Dixie Grand get outs too. Everybody forgets Dixie Grand.
Yeah. There's ways to do ad-lib 6-couple dancing, calling with it. It's very versatile. But any other comments, questions? Daryl, go ahead.
Yeah, I said that I would repeat this for the recorded part of it. I've been teaching college for almost as long as I've been calling, and not being the brightest bulb in the box. The mental image was simple for me, and it came at a very opportune time. Don has taken it and gone miles and miles beyond the way that I ever used it. For me, it was just a matter of setting up for a particular Alaman left, the 1, 2, 3, or 4, and calling basically the basic traffic pattern, which is chicken plucker, knowing that the number 1 is going to be here, the number 2 is a pass through away from that, the 3 is a trade by away from that, a pass through from there gives you a 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right across the line. So it was just so simple to control where that person was. And as far as the rest of it, it was done modules. It was done modules. That took care of the X's and O's. That took care of the part earlier. Can you do a chain down the line? Well, I know that chain down the line is made up of the 2 X's. Because it has a ladies trade and it has a bend the line from that 2-face line, a bend the line being a partner changing movement, and the ladies trade being a partner changing movement. Don, you want to show this what?
I just wanted to show that we did the spot here, but we can move this spot a variety of ways. And the simplest way to move a spot, let's say from here to here, is what Daryl said. He just starts with a 4 ladies chain. And then you follow this guy around and you have to follow him over to this spot. And all of a sudden, everybody else takes care of themselves.
Where's the 2, Don? Where's the
whoops.
Yeah, it's a pass through away from the 1.
Yeah.
Your hand is, oh, there you go. Right there. And then the 3.
So
the 3.
For convenience sake, we number these spots 1, 2, 3, and 4. No, that's not going to do it. And the W is because they're facing west in the process. And eventually we can get to
they're always
facing east, and you can get to any spot.
Yes.
It's a matter.
You'll notice.
Daryl,
You'll notice that in its simplicity, in its simplest form, as long as you keep those numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on that side of the grid, you swap those to the other side, they're all out of sequence.
Daryl, you're fading in and out, and we're catching.
Your basic chicken plucker, your basic right and left through. sometimes the connection is not the best. Can you hear me now?
We heard that sentence.
Okay.
So,
Basic traffic pattern. Okay. You go ahead, Don.
well, I was going to show.
This is
I was going to show the basic four ladies chain. Pardon my abbreviations, but I'm going to do a four ladies chain. And now I'm just going to dance this guy around till I get him onto this spot instead of this spot. Heads square through four. I'm just doing typical dancing here. Swing through, men run. That was two X's canceling each other. Couples circulate. Chain down the line. And all I have to do is a star through to get to the corner spot. So we did some different dancing. We brought him to a different spot, but because we did the four ladies chain, the spot was no longer here. It was here. And if we're lucky, he's facing corner number 1, 2, 3, and 4 couples.
One of the things that Daryl was mentioning when he was getting all cut in and out there was about sequence. And so when you're using the system, you don't actually ever keep track of the sequence or anything like that. But Don, can you put them in a square through 4 or box on 4, whatever type? Just put them so that the spots are lined up. Yeah. So it's a thing that you a thing of note, but it's not something that you ever think about or keep track of when you're using the system. Is that if your guy is on that bottom row, the row right in front of you, then they're going to be in sequence, and if he's up there on the top, then that means that they're out of sequence. And you might use that information if you were maybe mixing and matching mental image with some other things. Like you could, for example, you could mental image him to a particular place, like a right-hand lady box or something, a right-hand lady box out of sequence. And let's say that you had a module that is a nice a 0, but you want to start, or well, not a 0 because that wouldn't make sense, but a nice module that starts from a right-hand lady box out there, and you wanted to throw that in, you could do that, and on the mental image system if he's in or out of sequence, because it's just trivial. Like I said, if he's on the bottom, he's in; if he's on the top, he's out. And the but when you're actually using the system just by itself, you don't keep track of that. I mean, it's really nothing to keep track of anyway. But you don't use you never have to worry about sequence. You don't use that information when you're resolving. All you do is just dance him back to the spot with the whichever spot you want him on, with the X's all canceled out, and you're good. So so there are things that are in pieces of information the system happens to give you should you want them for some reason, but you don't have to worry about them.
One thing I should have mentioned, that right now the current terminology of FASR, FASR, formation, arrangement, sequence, and relationship. With mental image, you have to keep track of formation and arrangement. You do not have to keep track of sequence or relationship. That's the part that takes care of itself by doing these other things. And what Chris just said is draw a line through the square, and no matter where your spot is, if your active dancer is on the same side of that line as his Alaman spot, then the square is in sequence. And if he's on the other side of the line from that thing, the square is out of sequence. Now, let me add, that means the men are in sequence or the men are out of sequence. If all X's are canceled, the women are also in sequence or out of sequence. The women, when we know which side of the line the men are on, if X's are canceled, the women's sequence is the same as the man's. if X's are not canceled, if we have an uncanceled X, the sequence is opposite from what the man is.
That's the kind of information that's useful if you're going to mix it with some other system besides mental image, or maybe if you're working on adding whole new calls to the mental image system that nobody's ever done before, figuring that kind of thing out. So
or if you're just talking choreography with another caller that doesn't know the system,
right?
Yeah,
right.
but are the dancers in sequence here or not? And you can just tell them like that.
Right, but when you're actually using it, you never stop and say to yourself, "Gee, are we in or out?" Who cares? It doesn't matter. Just put him on the spot, and you're done.
See, that's what I was going to ask just real quick too. Say you're doing like an X call, for instance, and you're getting a resolve, and you realize, crap, did I cancel out that X? How do you go about resolving? As far as you still have to move that number one, the 2 spots. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't quite understand what the question was.
Well, try to say, like, say you're you call an X call, okay, and all of a sudden you're sitting there, calling along, and then you're getting ready to resolve, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, hey, did I cancel the X out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How can you, without knowing for sure if you had, without realizing, without thinking, hey, did I, is there a easy way as far as to get out if you, by chance, you didn't call that second X call to cancel out? Is there an easy way of resolving?
So there's a couple of ways. One is with dancer reaction when they're promenading. They'll tell you if you're out of sequence.
Oh, that's true too.
And with that, you can go back and correct what you've done. The other thing is, little thing I teach is called when in trouble, do it double. If I've just done a sequence of 3 or 4 calls, touch a quarter, split, circulate, boys run, and I lost track of how many X's were there. And by the way, I try to tell people, don't count the number of X's, and if it's an even number, you're okay, and it's an odd number, you need to cancel it. Trying to keep track, was that 13 or 14? Now, is that odd or is that even? Just do one, cancel it. Do one, cancel it. And that space between canceling can grow as you get more experienced. But when in trouble, do a double. Let's say I've done this from facing couples, touch a quarter, split, circulate, leaders run, slide through or start through, and I'm facing it again. I'm assuming regular couples. Did I call 1 X or 2? Well, I can't remember, but what I do remember is the little sequence that I just did, the little module, the flow module or what have you. And so I can call it again and just repeat it. And it turns out that if it was an O, if all X's were canceled, they're still going to be canceled. If there was an uncanceled X, the second time through will cancel it. So when in trouble, do it double. If you've done it twice, it's guaranteed not to have an X, not to have an uncanceled X. Does that partially answer your question, Steve?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I do is because especially when I was first learning, it was hard for me to remember. Again, you're just flipping back between X and O, but even still, you might lose track. And so what I do is I take my fingers, and if it's an X, then I cross my fingers in a certain way, and if it's an O, then I don't need to.
There are little crutches like that, as crossing, uncrossing, uncrossing. If your fingers are normal, then you can call an owl man left. If there's an X, then you've got to call another one.
What I actually do is I don't use my thumb. Well, actually, I use it for something. I use my 4 fingers, except for my thumb, to represent the 4 spots, and then I take my thumb and I stick it on the finger that is currently the spot. So if it's the usual starting spot there, that second spot there, then that means that looking at my left hand from left to right, the second finger and thumb are touching. And if if I call an X, then I take my thumb and I put it on the fingernail of the spot that it moved to. So if we were out there at the head square through 4, then I said swing through, at the head square through 4, second finger and the pads are touching. I call the swing through, and then I flip over to my middle finger and I touch my fingernail with it. So that's an X. And then if I do boys run, the spot is going to move back over there. So I move back to that second finger, and now I'm on finger pads again. And so at any given, and I just do this habitually. So if I ever get lost, I just look down at my hand. I go, oh yeah, it's over there. That works great until some smartass comes up in the middle of your sequence and starts shaking your hand.
Actually, that approach to me means thinking of too many things, but there is a book on it by Bill Ackerman and what's his name?
Rob French.
Rob French. They've got a semi-published, I guess, book on that, which is a slightly different approach, but using the same basics. I wanted to show one more thing, just for the heck of it. Am I sharing the whole screen so you can see the LMNR here right now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I said that as long as you cancel X's in the middle or left or on the same location, I want to show one case of canceling it in one location and then a different one and moving the spot. And if I cancel, I'm going to do an X in the middle and an X on the left, and it's going to move one spot from, going to move one position to the left. Let's do a, head ladies chain. I've done an X in the middle. I'm going to do 2 more X's in the middle that cancel each other. Heads, touch a quarter, and then center boys run. 2 X's that cancel each other just as a different way instead of calling square through. So I can't do an Alaman even though he's on his spot because I have an uncanceled X in the middle. Let's just prove that. And so it's not his partner there. I don't want to linger on it because I don't want you to think about sight calling. Now I'm going to do an X on the left. Ladies chain, just a simple, not necessarily good dancing, but just to do an X on the left. So I've done one in the middle and one on the left. My spot has moved one place to the left from here to here. And what's different here is we're in a trade by formation instead of an 8 chain through formation. And we can do an Alaman left from there. And so just this one simple trick adds a lot of variety to the feel for what your dancers are doing. Let's just show this here. Everybody's with partner in sequence and facing or next to corner. And I can call an Alaman left here and promenade home. Intaminations will oblige. Just an additional extension of that. But I've talked much too well. We've only heard from me, Chris, and how do I stop sharing? There we go. Have I stopped sharing appropriately? I think so. And we've run over time again. Oh, so let me do the official. Thanks, Dan, for hosting. Thanks, you guys, for coming and listening and chatting. And if you have to leave, don't apologize. If you want to hang around for more conversations, answers, and questions, please do. With that, let's hear from somebody other than Steve who does not use the system, and see what your thoughts are. Does it look like it's something worth doing? And Steve, I'm still haven't started a Saturday class, but it is in the back of my mind.
No problem.
Boy,
I'll kick this off for you there, Don.
Go for it, Mel.
I don't use mental image the system. I got the book and I've read through it, I think probably about 11 times now, and I'm still trying to work my way through it bit by bit. I have found on occasion that I've tried it usually I try it out if I'm doing a dance or something like that. I'll try it out just on a few opening sequences when I'm getting the dancers warmed up. It's a good way for me to just to reinforce that it works. But what I found is it's very, very difficult for me to unlearn before I learn. But that said, forcing it at the initial onset with easy movements, and then as soon as I got it, or I get lost, which is about 3 out of 4 times eventually. Up to that point, it works well, and then I just revert back to sight calling. I cannot and have not had the opportunity to put a lot of concentrated work into it on the floor with dancers, which is really, I think, where it will come into the fore. Doing it on the computer, very easy. It works 100% of the time. Doing it in front of dancers, it's hard to unlearn old habits.
Well, as I said before, if you really did want to get better with using it, next time you teach a class, the choreography is simple enough and you add one call at a time. But now I'm curious though, has this helped you understand choreography in general, just having the background of seeing some of these rules?
Seeing the rules helps definitely, because it allows me to say, oh, wow, I'm following this dancer. And I realize that in the back of my head while I'm sight calling, because I use a lot of modules, I use a lot of sight manipulation to get to a modular setup, that I realize that I think this is what Chris was alluding. I use a lot of zero modules. It allows me to move from one slot to another slot with a new tool in the toolbox, as opposed to isolated sight where I'll adapt a box, then move one couple over, adapt another box, move that couple back, and so on and so forth. This allows me to move the dancers and see where they are at any time, and I can do my isolated sight just picking whoever I want and then just flip back to the mental image. But as I said, thus far I've only been able to do it simply at the beginning, and then I get lost.
Well, what I'm hoping I have done here, and again, I'd like to hear from some people that had not seen the introduction at all, was giving you the basics of what you have to do, what the advantages are, what the disadvantages. And probably the big one is the fact that it takes a long time and a lot of practice to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But once you are comfortable, once you put that time in, it's
Yeah, well,
fairly easy to use.
what I can say is it definitely makes you more aware of the formation and the arrangement management, moving the dancers around back and forth, because you don't really think about it. You're automatically just tracking and your mind is focused to other things. And if you just, like I was just going X, O, X, O, X, O, X, 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 O, X, O, making sure, and I cross my fingers and uncross. And once I get there, and then I start sight calling, and then I just forget. And that it's not because I got lost; it's just because I just fall into the old habit, and I just forget to keep counting. And it does work.
It's easier to fall back on the old way, but it's handy to have this as a second nature kind of thing.
Absolutely. And for new callers, it's something that I actually do, although I don't use it and I'm not comfortable enough to teach it. It's something that I do recommend, because if you have this as a foundation, it will help your sight calling immensely, looking at flows and combinations.
I just noticed that Chris put in a link to Bill Ackerman's book. And I don't remember if I said it, but I put in a link to the 2-hour video that I have online, which will give you a closer, more thorough look than we did here, but still far from the 30 or 40 hours it takes to really learn this. And even after that, the students in my group have understood it, but still, like Mel says, you really have to work with it regularly. And in time of COVID, Taminations isn't worried about timing at all.
You know, the thing about that 30 hours, first of all, if you're going to be learning any calling choreographic management system, 30 hours is not a long time to learn any system. You can get started with mental image, almost instantly. The thing that people spend really all the time on, I think, is not really so much the mental image part of it, except in the sense of tracking the formation and the arrangement and following that guy around in your head. That's the thing that requires that sort of has to be effortless. The business with the X's and O's and stuff is not that hard. And I think what people spend the most amount of time on is they're just not used to keeping track of things like that in their head.
Yeah.
And like everybody has said, Mel has said, and several other people, it's good for you. no matter what system you're really going to wind up using, it's very good practice for because you really ought to be able to do that no matter how you're calling.
I like what you just said, Chris, and that once you start learning it, as long as you can cancel X's in the same location, cancel them as soon as you do them, the spot, left, center, middle, or right, the spot's not going to move. You can do an awful lot of dancing, an awful lot of calling without having the spot move. And the fact that it doesn't move all the time, unlike the sequence changes, how do you keep track of sequence? I've learned that right and left through will always change the sequence, no matter whether you're in lines, couples in the center, or what have you. But star through sometimes changes sequence and sometimes doesn't. How do you keep track of which calls do what when? Here you don't have to worry about it. It just happens. So if you're going to cancel X's in the same location, cancel them immediately. Learn pairs of calls that are 2 X's, like recycle and sweep a quarter, swing through and centers run. Then the spot doesn't move. It's always there, and you can just dance your guy to it. And you better, you've got to know how to follow formations and arrangements, no matter what you do, even with modules, unless you call complete modules from home to home, but which is totally memorized sequences.
Another thing that bears mentioning is for the women callers, it doesn't matter who in the square you follow. That has to do with where you're going to put your spots when you place them on the floor. But but you can follow anybody now. So that means if you're a woman caller, you could follow, say, the number 1 man, but you could just as easily follow the side lady or the head lady, or you can follow anybody you want. The materials are written from the standpoint of your typical guy, and he's going to follow the number 1 man because he's a man and he's used to sort of in his head dancing, and the guy's right in front of him, and that's who most people follow. But really, you could follow anybody, and all the rules are the same. It just has to do with where the where the spots are sitting on the floor. They're still going to be just in a nice little row there, but which one you start on, and if they're vertical or horizontal, and that sort of thing.
I hate to do this, but I want to repeat what Chris said in slightly different words. When I have the active man standing on his spot and all X's are canceled, everybody else who is taking care of themselves, everybody else is actually standing on their spot. And if I had wanted to focus on the woman, the number 2 woman or the number 3 woman or what have you, her spot is right where she is at that moment. And I could have danced her around and brought her to that spot the same way. The beauty is that an X is an X is an X, whether or not you're following the man or the woman, whether you're following the number 1 man or the number 2 or 3 or 4 man. And the spot moves in the same rules. If you move to a spot and an X in the middle and an X on the right, the spot's going to move one place to the right, whether you're following the woman's spot or the man's spot or what have you. So yes, we normally, out of convenience for the lazy teachers like me, follow the number 1 man as being active. But following anyone, once you've learned the rules, and I wish more women followed the active women dancer, but they've been taught by men. And also knowing that once you're comfortable with this system and you want to give variety to the dancers, as a man that's following the active man, follow an active woman. It's going to feel different to the dancers because you're just going to move them around differently, but your rules are the same and your spot is the same and what have you. Eric, you want to put in your 2 cents worth? Picking on poor Eric there.
Well, historically, if you will, here, I started out just, not to be a caller. I just wanted to learn how choreography worked. And I had been studying choreography for about 2 years, copying stuff out of books and out of the various note services. I had 5 or 6 of them I was subscribed to. And some things, if you will, sort of worked when I was trying to do mental image. Some things didn't. And I had stacks, a couple of feet high of, these pages of stuff. And then through a book, I saw Don Beck's, a reference to Don Beck's book. I ordered a copy, got it. I picked it up out of the mailbox on my way up to the apartment, sat down, started to read, and got into about maybe second or third chapter. And right away, he mentioned in there about Lady's Chain, which is the one thing I consider myself extremely stupid because of everything that I analyzed and I separated into stacks. Turned out everything that didn't work involved, if you will, an X call, a Lady's Chain. And the other stuff didn't. I went back and was going through it and saw that. But I read his book through. I mean, it said like in the first chapter, like read a chapter and let it sit for a day and then come back and read some. Well, I read the whole book through and then went back and read through again. And all of a sudden I'm looking and the sun is coming up. I've, been reading it all night long. But I started using that mental image then when I was calling. It was very fortunate. Some friends that were setting up a square for me to play with announced to me one night that they'd set up a class for me to teach. And it started in a couple of weeks. So I, just had to go. And as Don was saying, I basically learned 1 call or 2 calls a week. I tried to stay at least 1 week ahead of the class in terms of what I knew and how it affected and how it worked with the mental image. Went through all of mainstream doing that. It worked well. I called mental image for roughly 3 years, a little bit less than that, and then decided it was too much work. And sight calling was so much easier that that's what I did. Except now I find that what I do is I sight call to a point where perhaps I want to do resolution, and then I notice where I am, and then I mental image to resolution. So it's a great aid.
It's a handy tool. Eric, you've taught others to use it. Have you had troubles getting through to them?
No, not for the most part. People who have problems visualizing things, they have a terrible time, trying to do this. But those that can visualize what's going on, they take to it like a duck to water.
I frequently get wet when I do it too. No, never mind. Any other questions, comments? Also, as I've done in the past, want to solicit ideas on things you'd like to talk about on these Saturday sessions, or people you'd like to have hear their 2 cents worth or 3 cents worth on some particular item. As you say, I love presenting these and having them, but I don't particularly want to be the presenter all the time. You've gotten to hear a lot of my thoughts.
I'd like to add one comment on mental image calling in particular. I have, and all of the callers that have ever taught me that I ever consider worthwhile learning from have always stated that there are so many different methods of calling out there. The best method of calling to dancers is the one that works for you. And if mental image works for you, then that is the best method. The only way to find out what is the best for you is to actually give it a fair try. And if you haven't got the book, read through the book. If you haven't signed up for some of the sessions, sign up for the sessions. I unfortunately haven't been able to, but I have desperately wanted to for many, many years. Give it a shot. If nothing else, it puts it in the background that when you're in a position to help a new caller establish their skills, you've got the background foundation to point them in the right direction, or at least to the right people that know how to use this. So give it a fair shot, try it out. You'll find it'll open your eyes to whole different avenues of calling.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. I think I want to pick on Dan slightly here. Dan is a fast learner, and he's been working hard on this for 5 or 6 years, this being square dance calling and all the different aspects of it. One of them is, as a computer programmer, he has got a organized mind in that respect. And when I introduced Dan to mental image and he went through one of the classes, I'm sure, I was going to say, correct me when I'm wrong, Dan, but I'm sure I've got close to it. He didn't work on totally learning the system. He learned on relating the aspects of it to the his organized way of thinking of things. With that, comment on it, Dan. I think
yeah. So at some point, I bought your book from you, and then kind of skimmed it and said, "Oh, I've got to come back to this later when I understand a little bit more." And I took the wrong thing from the X's and O's, and so I built this dramatic big structure in my head about that. And then when it came time to actually take the class and learn, that structure got in the way when I was thinking through it. And I still have, so the structure that I built was basically that was the wrong thing was that X's change partner and O's don't. And in Don's system, X's change either partner or orientation, but if they change both, then they're an O. So, which is why chain down the line is an O. So I had this big metal structure built around that, and I'm slowly dismantling that and trying to build it back up in the mental image, with the other caveat that I find it difficult to keep track of where the resolve point is, or I'm struggling with keeping track of where the resolve point is versus where the corner is. So I guess my statement there is, when you watch the video or read the book, and my copy of the book is now being loaned off to another new caller, get that definition of the X's and O's down early and work with that, and don't try to shortcut it the way I did.
Interesting. When I teach the system, I don't teach the definition of X's and O's till people are really crying for it, like lesson 3 or 4 or 5, because it sounds like it's fairly complicated at first. It's easier initially to say, here's a list of X's, and I generally present the list of X's and O's, but X's are the only ones you have to worry about, because those are the ones you have to cancel. It's easier to just take my word for it that these are X's for a while, and eventually we'll give you a definition to satisfy your curiosity, but the definition is too complicated to try and do on the fly. But knowing the definition will definitely help you understand and learn which calls are X's and not.
I never think about what an X is. I just have a list of X's in my head. And the only time I ever would need to think about that is if I want to extend the system and add a new call, or some call that's not on the list, but I think should be on there, and then that might help me figure out whether it's going to be an X or not. But as far as what it really is, it's just it's almost like a piece of trivia. I never think about it ever.
By the way, this list of X's that I showed here, if you're calling advanced, there's also very few of those calls are actually. Now, I should also mention the X calls versus the O calls refer to two couple calls. And the four couple calls, some of them relate to this and some don't, and there's all sorts of other considerations, but these are all relative to two couple calls. I figured it was enough just to show these, but these exist. I also want to repeat what I said at the very beginning. One of the reasons I've hesitated doing this is I'm not trying to sell my system. I'm not trying to sell my book. I'm not trying to talk people into take my classes. I
am. They should take your classes and buy your book.
And I'm not going to tell you how much I paid Chris to say that, but it's not my system. It's some of the nuances of my particular version of looking at mental image I'll take credit for, but it's something. It's one of the many ways to analyze this kaleidoscope of things that's going on, and I think the more callers that have it in their toolbox as a basic understanding of what's going on, the more callers will be able to control their dancers better, either directly with this or as a background kind of thing.
I was just going to say, my background goes back, I learned first from Bill Peters, who was all modules. Unfortunately, after 20-year plus absence from the activity, my brain doesn't hold them quite as well. And I got your book and I looked at it and went, oh my gosh. And it went back on the shelf. Now I got a little bit of an idea what it is. So I'm going to go back and say, okay, this could be a very valuable tool. So I think I tend to basically just site call with, and then I use a cheat sheet for if I want to do, I got a few things that are good, some different modules that I can use at a given time. So I'm not reading the whole night, but this gets like, okay, this has got some possibilities. The only thing I'm seeing here, how much does this lead to the variety? Does this bring, from experience, does this give the opportunity to not get into certain things like, dive through square through 3 Allen man left,
Well, that's up to you.
Okay.
It gives you the opportunity to call whatever you want, sort of, and then get out of it. One of the things that I think we did here a few times is we get to this particular formation arrangement. What else can I call? Well, what other thing could I call? Well, what other thing could I call? And so you go down that mental list and don't pick the first two that come to mind. Don't call swing through boys run. Call swing through boys trade spin the top, or, so John, actually what I recommend is that you look at that 2-hour video I have.
That would be on next on my thing. I've got to set and do that.
Yeah, that I think it's a presentation I've done many times, and fortunately the last time I did it live, I also had a decent video camera, so I recorded it. Of course, I didn't have a cameraman behind it, just a tripod, so there's kind of funny glares here and there, what have you, but I think it gets the point across. By the way, Bill Peters, when I approached him with a version of spreading the word about this system, he said, well, nobody really has a good system. And I said, well, can I bend your ear for a little while to show you that there really is a system? And so we spent an hour and a half on the phone with me explaining to Bill what it was all about. And this was East Coast to West Coast long distance rates, which were worth it at the time, but it was still expensive compared to what it is these days. And Bill said, I give in. There is system. You really do have a way of doing that. Now you've got to write a book. You owe it to the world to tell them about it. And I think I have in the intro to the first printing that the kick in the pants to start writing this was from Bill.
Because his point, I was all, I mean, I've got his book still, and you've got transition modules and all sorts of different things. But he always had a session on site calling, because his idea was basically, if you need it, you're going to need it. So, but I've transitioned into predominantly site calling. So I need to expand and get my brain working better.
What you're telling me, I'm reading between the lines, is this session has awakened you to thinking about it again, and maybe we've got one other convertee, and that sounds great. I'm glad we've accomplished that much anyway. It's again, to me, exciting that there are rules that govern this black magic that we do. At least cover some of it.
I'd like to make just a couple of more comments, if I could.
Sure, go for it, Eric.
First of all, I just mentioned Don had mentioned this earlier, that you can, if you will, call a dance, just by yourself. This past Tuesday, I called out of town. It was a 3-hour drive to get to the dance, and I called in the car for about 2 hours before I got to the dance. Was able to practice and do a lot of things. I do that frequently whenever I'm, calling out of town and it's a freeway drive as opposed to city driving. And the other thing is, with regards to comment that Dan made, I use a different definition for X's than what Don uses. And it's just because I was trying to sort of follow, if you will, phaser, if you will, sequence. So I use quadrant partner, and an X is something that changes quadrant partner. And it turns out that there's still an extremely limited number of, quote, X calls. They're very easy to identify. And all of the other transitioning kind of rules, everything still works the same. So, I mean, you can do things different ways and still end up with the same basic principle working.
As I've said, there's several different ways of following it, and probably the biggest difference is how people define the X's and O's. I think my name is related to mental image a lot because I took the time to write a book about it, and the time was 7 years in the background of working from first putting it on paper until it came back from the printer 7 years later. But any of these systems work. They're all on the same principle: follow formation, follow arrangement, follow one key dancer, and keep track of which calls exchange partners and which ones cancel that. And the amazing part is that any exchange type call will cancel any other one, and depending on where you do it, the spot that you're dancing to may change, or the slot that some systems call it. One of the things Eric reminded me, and I talk to my classes about this frequently, is that I don't even think I put it in the book, but when you're doing some ad lib calling in mental image, you sort of lay out a roadmap. I'm going to go from here to here to here. I'm going to do some X's and then cancel them, and leave one uncanceled and cancel it someplace else and move the spot. If you try to follow somebody else's calling, it's kind of difficult because you don't know if he's about to cancel the spot, the X, or if he's about to cancel it someplace and move it. Following somebody else's choreography is pretty hard, but laying out a basic roadmap of where you're going and then using it allows for an awful lot of things. The only time that I used to follow other people's stuff is back when I was driving and listening to the Handhurst tape, because singing calls, they rarely move the spot. They basically dance around in the middle or on the right or on the left and cancel all X's wherever they are. So you can follow the choreography pretty simply, and it was a way. It's not as easy right now to have a whole collection of singing calls with the words, but unless you make a tape yourself. but it was a way to, while driving to a dance, to mentally follow this, that, and the other, and just keep my mind moving, and keeping up with stuff like that.
So many people talk about working out, choreography in their head while they're driving around, and I think that's great. And it always just makes me wonder the same thing, which is, what time did you say you were going to be getting on the road?
I hope you're not driving around these days, Chris. But guys, it's been almost 2 hours. Another typical Saturday morning 1 hour session. Oh, Mel, I got a question for you too. You were saying that people are dropping off. Is your group dropping off also?
Yeah, we were getting around 50 to 60. We've dropped down to about 35 to 40 on the Sunday morning sessions, and they average around 35 now of the people that are coming in to tune in on the sessions. But a lot of them have said, this is getting back. There's also a lot of dancer groups and whatnot that have found Zoom a particularly good medium, and especially in the States, depending on where you are, my 9 a.m. class time is anywhere between 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the States on Saturday night, which is usually a good time for a lot of people that aren't dancing that. And so there's a lot of other sessions that are going on now with people starting up dancing and traveling and other things opening. So it was expected, but as I said, we're going to keep going as long as we can. I'm not going to be online for the next couple of weeks because I'm having back surgery next Sunday, but Mark is going to be opening up the chat room hopefully and just having it as an open forum discussion. So anybody that wants to pop in, he'll be sending a new link on the Newbie callers and the callers and training websites rather than via email, but the room will still be open there to open up and chat about anything.
We should, I don't have anyone lined up for next week yet either. I do for the week after. So we should open Mark's thing for us at 11 a.m. Eastern time and just let it continue through. No, never mind.
Well, believe it or not, Don, some of these sessions have actually gone here. I remember when Dan used to leave the chat room open when we were going, and we'd be here for, God, sometimes 6-7 hours, and then flip over into my session and it'd go for another 11 hours. Yolanda is one of those. I remember the one session that we had, we started off at 1 in the morning and at 4 p.m. That's my time, 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, and at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon, they were still going. And that's about the time I just went, my wife hauled me out to go shopping. We came back and we were still going.
One of the things that I'm not good at is saying goodbye, and I've started about 3 or 4 times, but I have another question. Yolanda, you've sat through a good deal of one of my classes, and you've had more troubles than others. And I think part of it because of the way your mind thinks, everybody's mind thinks differently, and people have to, as I say, you've got to be able to follow formation and arrangement. And I think you were having a little trouble with that originally, but I'm just curious, did you get anything out of it that helped understand some of the stuff going on?
Yes, and I one of the things I realized by going to your session was that I think like a woman's caller and I follow the women's position, or I swap it back and forth. And so I hadn't realized that until I was in your session, which made me go right down to basics. And it helped me understand some principles of why you guys do chicken pluckers and like why you put it across the street, and so I am hoping to go back to some of the videos that I taped and start from scratch, but I actually want to go back to really basic choreography. So in the beginning, when we did these sessions, we would play on terminations and stuff, or even before terminations, we played and we would take turns. And so I'm suggesting maybe we could do that again, for a couple of these sessions when you don't have a speaker, and because the new people really seem to enjoy that. But yes, I did. I think part of it for me was I was snow shoveling and getting up at 8 a.m. to go to your class, and that didn't help. I was pretty tired when I was taking the class. But yeah, no, I really have to learn how to follow the lady instead of the guy, because I can dance both, but I need to follow the lady. And so, and when I tried to do the guy, it was like calling a duel instead of, but that's just how I think. And
I've
so,
been tempted to, because all the rules are the same. It's just focusing and practicing in a different way. I've been tempted to do an all women's class to
mhm.
strictly follow the women. And if there are enough people interested in that, I might do it. Just as a plug for the classes, and I said I'm not trying to plug things, but if I have enough interest, I will run another one. They're usually at Wednesday or Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 8 a.m. West Coast US and Canada. Late afternoon in Europe, and approaching midnight from one direction or another in Australia and Japan. I'm currently running one session that's 3 hours earlier with several Japanese callers and a couple of Australian callers. I get up early. I have to set my alarm, but it's 8 o'clock Eastern Time. But it's a much more middle of the evening for them over there. I've done 5 groups. Some of the ones, the callers have been more experienced than I have and have been using this one form or another for years, but I've still opened some eyes, and enjoyed so much getting to know people, as I do on this Saturday thing, from around the world, and how this square dance thing is a universal kind of thing with it. There are different accents depending on what country you're coming from or what continent, but it's been wonderful.
Yes, these sessions have certainly opened my eyes. I didn't even know when I started with you guys, at you and Dan and Mel, I didn't even know all the formations, right? I mean, now it's becoming part of my vocabulary. On some, I still hear some stuff and I'm going, oh, okay, that's new. But I mean, I could listen to this conversation now and actually comprehend what you were trying to say. Like last year, if you had started talking about mental imaging, that would have been way over my head. I'm still like at the very beginning stage, but at least I understand what you're discussing.
I like
Yeah.
what you said about trying to say. With that, guys, I think I'm going to bow out. Thanks again, Dan, for hosting, for hanging in there. Thank you guys for contributing. Hopefully some of you have gotten some new insights. And if you have further questions, by all means, contact me, join one of my classes. Again, I'm not trying to sell that. I'm just trying to make more people.
Oh, go ahead, Don. I make blatant product plugs all the time for your book.
I have enough salesmen here for me, right? John, I look forward to hearing your feedback once you've watched that video and where you want to go from there, because I like the fact that this little intro sort of opened your eyes a little bit more to what's there, which was
definitely, yeah. Looking forward to that, and then pulling it on my Thursday group and see what they do.
Yeah. And I have watched a 2-hour presentation. I actually watched it before I joined his class, and it is helpful. John, I would recommend you watching it.
And again, the attempt there, even more so than here, is just to make you aware that a system works and that a system exists.
Definitely.
And that it would be worth for a lot of people to dig in further.
Well, as a final blatant product plug, if you don't mind, Don, my session is going to be starting in about 5 hours. Open up the chat room, but with Ed Foot today, we're just discussing choreography, the Dixie Grand Get Out, site resolution, and a few other things. So, if anybody wants to tag on in, the links are on Zoom, and we'll see you there. Don, I love the session. I always love hearing about this because it just shows me how much I don't know about what I should know.
Did I do 1 or 2 sessions on yours about mental image?
Two and a follow-up. Yeah.
And
we're still waiting for another one.
Well, you did an interesting thing, is you made a prerequisite to everybody watching that they watch the 2-hour video. So I got to sort of jump in the middle and go from there. That I found more difficult than teaching the whole thing or the full 2-hour presentation. And I found this one even more difficult, is how do I summarize it down to half an hour and still keep interest and what have you. As it was, I was preaching to a lot of the choir I know here, but that the comments have been good and helpful, and hopefully it's helped some of the others along the way. So as I said, I'm not very good at saying goodbye. Let me try one more time.
There we go.
You can always
Bye.
say bye and hit that little red button in the
Yes.
bottom.
Bye, Don.
But I always,
But I have the little red button.
but I
Thanks,
always,
bye.
but I always want to save the chat before I leave, and then something else goes. So I'm going to push the leave button right now, and then you guys can talk about me. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Got to run too. It's just so you know, the desert is going to be 115 plus degrees this next week. So
Oh
should be
no.
gangs of fun.
We'll think about you from our 70 to 75.
I know, up in
highs.
Petaluma, actually. Thank you very
Yes.
much. I
Hey,
understand.
we're hovering in the -2, so you know where you find sympathy from me. It's somewhere
Yeah,
in the
we're-
dictionary
yeah, we're
between
about-
2 words that we
Yeah,
shall
we-
not mention.
Your
Yeah.
summers are brutal too. So yeah. Anyway, hasta la
Well,
vista,
hopefully
guys.
you've got air conditioning.
Yeah.
You guys take care. I'll see some of you in a few hours.
Oh,
Cool.
definitely. Bye
Bye,
now.
y'all.
Bye, everybody.